Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Creative Insider Podcast number 61 with me, Georgi. The day after the 4th of July, we couldn't have other than an American guest on the podcast. And in this episode, I had the pleasure to talk with Jace Hudson from Dallas, Texas. Jace is an airbrush artist, helmet painter, photographer, and he is founder of the Fast Life Garage and host of the Fast Life Podcast. We talk about many topics about how he started working hands-on motorcycles and how he got to the point where he is today. A very interesting and a very different conversation than the usual. But before we start the conversation, I want to thank you for taking your time listening to this podcast. And I want to remind you that the show is completely for free. We have done it for more than a year now. And if you want to support us a little bit, you can do that by subscribing to the show, leaving a good rate if possible, if you're an Apple Podcast. And we suggest you to stay in touch with us on thecreativeinsider.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and where you actually can listen to all the episodes. And you'll find also the first articles on the website. We have written the first article about different, about traveling and how that impact the creative mind. And also there will be soon many more articles, and you can find other resources on there that we have created. And also, if you join a newsletter, you'll get a free guide about how to create a digital filing system, which might sound obvious, but it's not that easy. Another great way, not that great, but still great way to support the show is by following our social media channels, which are at TCI Podcast and the LinkedIn page, The Creative Insider. And if you really, really love what we do and that helps you somehow or inspires you and you feel it's important to make this show sustainable, to make us improve, to give us the resources to get better tech, to get maybe some people which can help us with the audio quality and transition also into a video podcast, you can support us on Patreon. Below, you'll find the link in the description where you can spend $5 a month or the wished amount of money that you can spend. And in the next months, when we reach some following there, we will be creating also some perks and exclusive access to the patrons. So thank you very much. Enough with the chatting. I want to say one more time, Happy Independence Day, happy 4th of July to all the Americans, and enjoy the conversation with Jace Hudson.
The whole world stops just like that. The whole world stops just like that.
Hi, Jace. How are you, man?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing good too. It's funny because you were a little late because of traffic jam in Dallas, and I was thinking this guy's a motorbike. Yeah, but I think in the US you have a big badass motorcycles, don't you?
Yeah, it's a pretty big one. But it's so hot here right now. It's not really the best time to go ride bikes. You know what I mean? It's like 100 degrees outside and the sun's just boiling down on you. So not the best time to be on a motorcycle.
Oh, that's a very big confusion for me because you guys use the Fahrenheit. So let's check out what is 100 degrees. Okay, it's
yeah.
37 for the Europeans. I've got to know some guys from the US, from Wisconsin, here in Germany. They were exchange students, and I think it took them half a year to learn our degrees, to get a feeling how what's the temperature, and I think also the time, because we use what you call military time.
Okay, yeah.
It's so funny.
I kind of understand military time, or that type of time system, so I get it.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. You just count to 24 instead of 12.
Twice.
Yeah, and I think we got connected through Matt Alvers somehow, who was on our podcast too, because afterwards we reached each other on Instagram, and I thought you're a very interesting character because like when I started the podcast, I wanted to talk to creative people of any kind, and like your kind of creativity, it's haven't even been through my mind so far. So you can introduce yourself a little bit, and what you do, what is your craft?
Cool. Well, my name is Jace Hudson. I own a brand shop here in Texas called the Fast Life Garage, and my computer's flipping out. Sorry.
Don't worry.
So I have a shop called the Fast Life Garage, and basically we are a custom motorcycle paint shop, right? And it's kind of a very, very unique type of art, if you will, that that I kind of fell into. You know what I mean? I didn't really plan to do this like growing up. I did like art. I did want to be in something creative artistically, but the time that I was in high school was like the late 90s. I graduated in 2001, so that time frame, like we didn't quite have the internet the way it is now, so there were so many things that I was never exposed to in any form or fashion, you know, like art wise or just creatively at all, right? But I knew how to wet sand cars and kind of grew up in the paint and body shop. My dad was a painter, so I got forced to go work there as a kid. Funny enough, I actually was going to college to be an architect. Actually, in the late 90s, we were on AutoCAD, and it was at the time when everybody was switching over from drafting tables to using computer programs, and really wanted to do that job. And I got lucky and got an internship as a draftsman at a firm, and I realized really quickly that I wanted to be more hands-on with things. Like I wanted to physically put things together and physically build things, as opposed to just drawing it on paper. You know what I mean? So I kind of fell back into the custom or in the paint world, you know, because it was a trade that I kind of had a foot in and I understood it. And I guess, to be completely honest with you, you remember that movie Fast and Furious?
Yeah.
So that movie came out and it spoke to me at my age in a way that it made cars cool to me, because I didn't really care about cars and vehicles very much. You know, I was a kid that didn't want to get dirty. You know, I wanted to stay clean. I wanted an office job, those type of things. But that movie made it look cool. It made it look fun, hanging out with your friends, working on your car. And from that point on, that was like something I chased, was that kind of vibe. And like I said, the paint thing was just my way of actually having my hands in that world and working on cars all day. You know what I mean? Eventually I got into motorcycles because I guess that's where the art came along, is because on motorcycles, people custom paint them it's a very, very common thing. Like people airbrushing, pinstriping, lots of different types of art goes into motorcycles because it's a smaller canvas. And the type of work that some of us do on motorcycles, if you were to do it on a car, it would be an ungodly amount of money to do. And that's why you don't see it that much on cars. You know what I mean? At least not in America.
No,
I know there's a lot of...
In Europe, we don't see any kind of your art, which is very... I mean, maybe here in Germany a little more. You have completely custom-made motorcycles. So, like, for your information, I'm originally from Bulgaria, which is Eastern Europe. Then I grew up in Italy, where we drive like all the small scooters and Vespas. So we point on small practical way of moving around because of the traffic jam. And here in Germany, for me, in my opinion, from all the experience that I have throughout Europe, it's the most American country. So people like to do like a lot of American stuff, which is counterintuitive. They barbecue a lot, and they drive these big ass cars because they have the car industry. But they keep them. I don't know, the style is very clean, more or less. It's minimalistic, and with motorbikes, they have some. I know that there are some badass shops that build like brand new motorcycles, like custom made, something like the Orange County choppers. There was this Discovery Channel series. So you see around a little bit of motorbikes, but I don't know if you see a lot of paint art on any vehicle actually. And I'm curious, you said like you started painting cars since you were younger with your father, but were you already into cars and vehicles in general, or you just, as you said, you just transitioned by accident because that was something easy to go with, to be hands-on?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't really like it. I didn't like the car industry. I mean, not the industry. I didn't like working on cars. But after that movie, and like I said, I was pretty inspired by it. It seemed like an opportunity to engulf myself in it because now I liked it. Right? It's like it's just weird. Like, I think in one of the questions you asked too, at the end of it was, what inspires you, and things like that inspire me. Seeing a good movie about cars that makes it look cool to me, that changed my opinion about it. You know what I mean? And made me want to be a part of it. And then, street racing has always been a big thing here in America. And, likewise, I've found myself doing that and found friends within it. And I don't know, man, like jumping into the cars was just a way of, let me back up for a second. I felt like sitting in the drafting work, as a draftsman, I felt bored every day, like sitting there, and another set of plans come in, and then I have to check them and make sure that they're, compliant with the ordinances of the town that the place is getting built. And it just felt so repetitive. And, I think a lot of us as kids are thinking like, I'm gonna be an architect and I'm gonna get to design stuff. And realistically, you're getting hotel plans from a company, and then you got to make sure it works within the city that it's going in. And that's your job from a lot of architecture, at least here in America it is, the commercial side of things. And I wanted satisfaction of seeing something getting done, built. Like I said, in that movie, in that Fast and Furious movie, there's a part where they got this old car that they pull off a trailer, and then they have all these parts laid out on the ground, and it's just kind of like the camera's panning over it. And the excitement of seeing that and how it comes together and comes to life, like that is what I love about anything that I do creatively, whether it's the paint jobs on the bikes that I do now or the things I was doing back in 2001, 2, and 3 when that stuff came into my life, So
yeah, I understand. That's frustration that a lot of people in my field get, because the problem with buildings is that you get to design them, but the designing process, it doesn't get so long as you might think. And then the building process takes a lot, and it's a lot of this hustle that it's actually checking, coordinating, writing emails, because it's not a process of one person. And also to get the building ready, it's like 2 years or something. But I can say from my side that the personal satisfaction for me in the first time since I'm a professional in this field is to go on the construction side and walk through what I've once imagined in my head, and now being there and walking through it, it felt super weird. But as you said, I'm not going to deny the process before you get to that point. It's long and and often boring or harsh, and not always it's something extremely creative. But yeah, because
what you said though, like that's something I never got to experience, like seeing something I draw come to life. So I think that if that would have happened, I probably would have had the satisfaction that I was looking for. But to your point.
Yeah, but I think in America, it's also, you have to be very conscious if you want to do that job, because you guys have this super expensive education system, and architecture is a protected field, which means you have to have a degree, and you can easily go into this big debt if you don't have your family to back up the payments of the tuition. But so okay, you realize that that was something cool that you can imagine to do professionally for like as a living. And how did you learn? Were you naturally skilled? Because like when I see your art, like for the people to imagine, they can just go on Instagram and check at the Fast Life Garage, and it's super good. It's like, and everybody have seen like some TV shows, like I mean, I like cars, I like motorbikes, I like also people that do things. And when you see how precise this art is, were you a natural talent, or how did you learn to do these things?
Well, so there's two parts of being a painter, a custom painter. There's the side of it that is the exact same thing that people do to paint cars and vehicles, is that process with the spray gun and things like that. And then there's the art side of it, which is a lot more fine art, and you're using airbrushes and paint brushes and things like that to kind of create the finished product. So like I said, growing up in a, my dad had a paint shop, so I was always forced to learn those things, the more dirty, boring part of the job, if you will, right? The prepping, the spraying, all the sanding, all that stuff, right? Well, I grew up also into comic books, and I used to love to draw. Now, I wouldn't say that I was amazing at any of it. I had good hand-eye coordination, so I could put things together, but I wasn't like some of the things that you probably see people sketching and drawing these days. It's mind-blowing, but I was always creative like that. I remember, I also played basketball in high school, so we used to like paint our shoes different colors, right? Back in the 90s, we wanted to have like our shoes look different than everybody else's, so we would paint them and things like that. So I always had this I want to create something or customize something to my liking kind of attitude, And the car thing was the first thing that really gave me. The car thing was like, the paint work was like a job, so I did it for a living. But then I got another job later on in my life, about 2004, just doing the boring job, the sanding and all the stuff that nobody wants to do. And at that job was a custom motorcycle paint shop, right? So I wasn't into motorcycles. I was a car guy. And I get this job. I just needed a place to make money. And I'm surrounded by an airbrush guy, a guy that lays out graphics with tape, and all these other people that are creative and they're artistic. And I'm like, I'm artistic too. Like, I know I am. So it just kind of showed me something I didn't know existed, right? Like, I knew that there was custom paint, but I'd never seen it done before, And so I didn't know if it was obtainable. I didn't know. And when I saw these guys doing it in my face, I'm like, oh, I could do that. You know what I mean? It shows you like these very complicated designs, and you see it start and come to life, and you're like, oh, okay, that's not as complicated as I thought, And honestly, today, I mean, you fast forward almost 20 years, and that same mentality has been, I do it in so many other things, whether it's the podcast that we started doing, or, I'm very, very big into photography, and woodworking is another thing I like to do. Like all these different types of creative outlets is kind of because of learning how to do one, it made me not scared to try other things, if you will. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you just need to find the right focus. And as you said, when you see somebody that is doing it, and if you have this creative spirit, if you want, you feel like driven towards this creative practice. I remember that when I was a kid, I have a cousin who was like 5 or maybe 5 years older than I am, and he was way better to draw than I was. And when I saw his drawings, I was like, damn, I wanna do it too. And I would draw and draw and draw, and then I got better. And then I went to an art school in Italy, and then there were people that for 5 years just drew, because then I switched to the architectural class, but they just drew hand-free drawings, and they became like a printer. That was like crazy shit I've seen in that school. So I think it's a matter of practice and a little bit of focus and motivation. But I wanna ask something, because I don't know anything about painting. What is sanding? What does it mean, sanding?
So sanding is like you have this paper that has like a grit on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
okay.
What you're doing.
So you make it like just very very like you shape it in the end. There are no like rests.
Exactly. So the sanding actually bites into the material that you're painting on, and allows the paint to adhere to it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it is a shaping process, but it's also a help it stick to each other.
Yes, and remove like old paint if there is old paint and stuff like that. Yeah, I've done that with some painting. Painting works actually. We just didn't know the English word of it. And so what I'm also like very curious to understand is, like you said, 2004, motorbike shop, other painters. You go like, I can do it too. How do you learn to do something like that? Because I guess that if you mess up your first artworks, it must be expensive to do you do it for free, or do you do it for yourself? I always like,
Well, when I first started, it was, like I said, having the basics down of painting and knowing how to like paint a bike of one color. Like I knew how that, but it was like the flame jobs or some kind of art that you're putting on top of it was what I was learning and practicing. And it's kind of hard to explain through a podcast like this, but basically it's like you just said, every little small thing within this field is one of those things that if you do it repetitively, you get good at it, right? If you lay out graphics a lot with tape, you get better at it, right? You start to see it more. And then one thing I think it naturally happens is you start to see other people's paint jobs, and you start to pick it apart. Like how did they do that? Okay, they did this and they did that, and that's how they got that. And so you're constantly dissecting other jobs. And when you're doing that, you're also adding a little bit to your toolbox, if you will, of like, okay, now I know how to do it because I see what he did or what he created. You know what I mean? And it takes time to build styles and things like that. And I feel like me now as a professional in this, I feel like I just came into my own personal style of paint work within the last 3 or 4 years of me doing it, right? Up until then, I think most of my career was seeing somebody else do something and me trying to also do it, but with my own twist, if you will. So I wasn't like necessarily trying to copy them, but like I needed to see it before I could create it, if you will. And I feel like it took a while of absorbing everybody else's style that I was influenced by before it helped me create the style that I have now. So it just takes a long time, man, to do all this stuff.
Yeah, I get it. And I get all the reverse engineering you do, because, for example, when you learn architecture, basically you do what you do through 5 years is getting invented task for yourself, like assignments, and you go through websites and check out other buildings, check out how they, like, you have now access to, there is a website called Arc Daily where you can get like the drawings, the plans for competitions, and then you want to draw the same way, because I think every artist, every creative, it's obsessed, of getting the result because I don't know, when you do something, that thing represents you, like when you build something, so you want to, like, you don't want something crappy to be your artwork, so you do reverse engineering of Photoshop, like designs, and you make them your own, and somehow, as you said, through the process, because you won't be able to do the exact same work. But what I meant is, like, for example, what is exactly the process to do all these? I mean, now after so long, You can see on the picture of the things you do, the helmets, the bikes, that it's gotten way more than just some. You can do a lot of things. But for example, to do flames or other form of shapes and tribals that you do on these motorbikes or on the helmets. I guess you first do the first layer of paint. And how do you actually draw on it? Do you directly draw with the
you use a very thin tape. It's almost like I don't know your measurement system very well to kind of give you an idea, but it's very thin. Like
you can use the American one. People gonna Google it.
it's like an 1/8 inch tape or 16th inch or a 1/4 inch. Those size tapes, and you use those to lay out graphics. It's plastic tape that kind of can bend and move and make shapes. And basically that's realistically the one way. And then, like I said, I have a vinyl cutter too. I have a lot of computer stuff. So over the years, you learn how to do graphics on the computer and design stuff, and then cut it out in vinyl and use it as paint masks as well. So there's a lot of different methods to create the same thing, right? And sometimes it's just it's figuring out the job and what's the best way to attack the project at hand. Like, how should I go about it? What should I use? What method should I go with? And each one can also provide the same shape but give you a different vibe, different look, different style. So there's what I used to do when I started, the way I got good at laying out graphics was I used to actually steal the tape from the job I worked at, and I'd go home and I would because my refrigerator was like a smooth, glossy surface, right? So I would lay out flame jobs on the refrigerator at home just to kind of practice using the tape to get familiar with it. And then I just pull the tape back off, and that actually can be strangely fun, designing and putting tape on something and creating, a design. Like on a refrigerator, like you have a big surface and you want to make it look cool. So you're actually taking the canvas that you're on, whether it's a refrigerator or a car or a motorcycle tank, and you're making those graphics just fit it and look good on it. You know what I mean? And that's the fun part, is like, how do I make this thing look cooler with graphics on it? And you have to learn how to do all those type of things. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And did you actually paint it or just try?
I would just lay the tape on. I would just put the tape on and then enjoy it, and then pull the tape back off and then do it again, just to get the muscle memory down, get the more you do it, then the more easier it becomes. And I've noticed that with just about everything I do in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true, because actually I've read in an article that the more you do an activity, funny enough, your brain starts getting better. It understands that you want to do that activity, so your brain actually starts to adapt, so it makes you do it better. And that's what practice does.
Yep.
And how long did you work? After how long did you say to your boss, "Hey, dude, I can do this too. Let me do it at work." And
for that shop, it's a real funny story. But I worked for that guy on and off for about 6 years, and I worked for him about 6 times. Basically, it took about a year before. I would say probably took 2 years before I ever got to do any artwork for the shop that I was at. But I had started doing my own stuff at home, right? So I would, now I kind of learned how to be more of a businessman at that time too, how to talk to customers, how to get work, how to sell work. And that helped me get my own work and get my own jobs. And then eventually he hired me back to do, put it like this, it was a 2-year period between I started there sanding, and then 2 years later, I was the top guy in the place. You know what I mean? As far as I was airbrushing, I was doing the most important work out of this shop within 2 years. And it's just because I had found something that I felt like I could grow in. I felt like there was no cap of what I can do and where I could go with it. So I just I really dove deep in the whole process, and I didn't party. I didn't do anything else. I painted. I would paint this, and then I'd go to this shop and paint that, and I was just enthralled with it. You know what I mean? And I obsessed it over it for those 2 years, and then it got me somewhere. You know what I mean? And
Yes. Well, I think that you have to go through a like time like that so that you can become really skillful and better at what you do.
yeah,
So I think everyone needs to get a little bit obsessed with something really deeply so that he master it. And after that, how long did you manage to like? When did you get the idea? Okay, I can start my own garage and I can start doing this on myself.
well, I think that in 2011 is when I officially left that shop for good, and it got to a point where basically I was personally bringing in 3 to 4 times the amount of money that I was taking home, right? So at that point, it was like I had a conversation with the guy and said, you know, I need to make more money. I'm bringing this much money in, and he didn't really want to give me more money, so I was kind of forced to go out on my own which was was a good thing. I mean, I wouldn't be here now if I didn't. I'd probably be stuck at his place, making him more money and making him more famous, if you will, in our world. But like I said, going on my own, it was tough. I tried the partner thing. I kind of got screwed there. Uh, Learned a lot of lessons about business in that part, and then also it's kind of weird to talk about, but in the early 2000s, the idea of this big shop, this big brand, employees and all this stuff and massive amounts of work was kind of like, I thought that was success, like I needed to have that to be successful in this business. And then as much as the internet has taken over everything in our lives, the last 10 years have been so amazing, and I don't have to do as much work. You know what I mean? You find better customers across the country, and even I've done some work for overseas, in Europe and things like that, and you just find better people. And so now it's like I want a small business. I want it to be as small as possible, and I want to do as much as I can and get paid as much as possible as well. You know what I mean? Instead of volume, you're doing less work, and you get to put more of your heart and soul into it, if you will. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny that you're the guy that says that. Like, that's also like something that I really wanted to discover through the podcast and the conversation I have, and to really go into conversation with any kind of different people. Because like if you start with stereotypes, like the classic stereotype for a Texan guy, it's like everything big, everything loud, everything. Yeah, like that. I understand what you're saying. Like more bigger shop brings bigger amount of work, and maybe you won't be even like as soon as the business gets too big, you have employees. You become a manager. You've ended up doing what an architect job is, to just do something different than painting or actually being hands-on. And that's very true in every business. But you have said a lot of things that are very interesting. I'm curious, you can describe this in the way you want. You can say just also like when you started and when you become the top guy in that paint shop, how much money does something like that make for you? Like, I don't want an exact number if you don't want to say that, but like what kind of lifestyle do you save a lot of money?
There's a lot of money in paint, but there's a lot of money in materials, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the things that we need to create paint jobs are very expensive, and they go up in price every year. In that time frame, like in 2007, 8, 9, I think the most money I ever made a week was like $800 a week. So it wasn't the kind of money, like I said, that I was bringing into the shop, right? Like in our industry, it's not uncommon for a shop to do $100,000 to $500,000 a year in paint work, but the more you're doing, then that like can easily be $100,000 in materials. You know what I mean? Just to do the job, and then you have your overhead with the shop and the bills, and it gets very expensive. It's a very expensive thing, and that's kind of why I started the podcast. Like I didn't see myself. I don't see myself painting for the rest of my life professionally as a career. Although I do want to paint for the rest of my life. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course.
I just I would like for our podcast or my photography to kind of pick up and be the breadwinner of the financial means that I need to live. And then to paint a helmet or a bike for somebody could go back to being fun, like it was. I was telling you about seeing the Fast and the Furious with all their buddies hanging out, building that thing in the garage. I love that part of doing it, painting something for my friend and giving it to him. But when you have this overhead and this lifestyle that's attached to it, like everything has to cost money, and it kind of I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's just one of those things, man.
No, man, I think it's true. Like nowadays, the thing is that it's very cheap to get like a pretty comfortable lifestyle, and also, when you're too much under stress, you realize that you want to enjoy your life and not just go through it. I think I don't know how it feels in the U.S., but the U.S. for the Western world is still sort of the leader of setting up the tone and the culture. And for many years, the culture has been work, work, work. Like you have to work a lot, so make more money, buy bigger things, buy better stuff. Like they get old, buy new stuff, and so on. And I think we have some year of difference. I'm a little younger than you are, but I think more and more like it's getting about having more free time and like getting money, but having the time to do what you love. And even if you don't do something, just to have time to spend with your dear ones. And every creative job involves, what I like about creative jobs is that it's not bullshit, like there is like, you cannot say, I can do this helmet, I can do this paint work and stuff like that. And then if you don't deliver, it comes out because it's physical. It's like a physical result of work. And the same thing, it's with architecture, although in longer form. Everything that you need to make physically, it takes a long time. So these jobs can be very, very cost like a lot of time. And I understand what you're saying here. But you mentioned now many times the podcast we haven't mentioned, I think, in the beginning. So your podcast is called also the Fast Life Podcast, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I'm a podcast lover, and when you told me that you have a podcast, I thought it's really cool, and I listened to the podcast the last few days. I mean, I haven't. I've tried to just binge through many episodes to see if it changes through the episodes. And which episode are you now? Like you're quite ahead.
Last night we just recorded 209, so we're on and then tomorrow night I have a podcast, so it'll be the 210th.
How often do you do it, guys?
I since I have sponsors, I produce at least 5 podcasts a month, and that way my sponsors know that they're getting episodes, for the money that they give us to do it. But like I think you had mentioned earlier, like we set up a studio at our shop and we set it all up to be like, bam, like we're running, you know what I mean? Like not a lot of setup, you know what I mean? So it's very easy, ready to rock and roll whenever it's time. And, I mean, it's a scary platform, right? Because we were kind of talking about it before. It's like, you never know if you say something wrong on a podcast, if the world's going to come after you or not, and being a motorcycle dude and a guy that spent most of his life in a garage with other men, we have a vocabulary that's not very acceptable to mainstream culture, if you will. You know what I mean? So we have to constantly try to keep that under wraps and not be offensive to many different types of people these days. But like I said, in that form or fashion, it's scary because, you start making money in it, and it starts doing well, and then you get wrapped up. You're having some drinks on a podcast and say the wrong thing, or it comes out the wrong way, and next thing you know, like all that money is gone. You know what I mean? Sponsors pull out. Uh, when COVID happened, we were scared because a lot of sponsors pulled away after COVID because they didn't know what the economy was going to do, what it was going to look like. So that hurt us quite a bit. You know what I mean? And we just now kind of got back up where we needed to be with that financially. So
Yeah, I think that's true. Like when more and more people listen to you and there are money on the plate, and as I said, now in the US, it seems at least from the outside everything is a little bit more exaggerated, and there is this cancel culture, as you say. It's a little weird, but I think that your podcast I've been listening to, it's a very niche podcast, but I think it's fun to listen. Like, you guys talk a lot about motorcycles, but motorcycles involves a lot of traveling, a lot of adventures. And while talking about motorbikes, you start talking about some events or something that happened. I don't know how many guys you are, like 4 or 5, and everybody have also family stories. Like there are a lot of laughs, and like myself have been very, very like entertained by it. So I think it's mainly, as you said, a man podcast because some of the humors won't be very well accepted, I guess, by the ladies. But I think it's like if someone likes like this kind of entertaining podcast, should go check it out. And how did you come up with the idea of starting a podcast? Because, like, I mean, when you're in your business, you don't really have to,
there's probably the same thing that for you too. I mean, like I think I'm a product of Joe Rogan as well. You know, like listening to his podcast for years, and then finally seeing that in the space of motorcycles where I operate, there wasn't a podcast that really used his form, right? So the Joe Rogan podcast is very open and free form and just hanging out and talking like we usually would in the garage. You know what I mean? And so I definitely can talk a lot. I think I've gotten a good handle of it, so I'm not talking over the guests like I was early on. But also, I've been in the motorcycle industry for 20 years, so I know a lot of the higher end, bigger names and brands. So it was very easy for me to start a podcast and have high profile guests within our industry on. And, like I said, with my connections through business, the fact that I have a profession in the motorcycle industry, I also ride motorcycles, and I do so much around it that I have so much that I can bring to the table conversation wise with just about any guest within the world of it. You know what I mean? So
yes, it's true. And I mean, like, you build up a community. Like, for example, even Joe Rogan, he started with comedians, but you can, if you think about it, you can use the storytelling just for everything, like for anything you want. Like in your case, guys, it's like motorbikes, but you can, like, it's really cool. Like, if somebody starts listening to your podcast for several episodes, as I did, you start getting like getting into it. Like, you're like, oh, now they're talking again about that and that and that. And I'm sure if you listen to a lot of your episodes, you'll gather understanding of the world pretty well through also entertaining. So it's entertainment. I liked it, as I said, like it's and so how did you start, like but on a practical way, like from scratch, just figuring out how to record it? How?
So in 2018, podcasts were they were already pretty big. You know, a lot of people had them already, but companies didn't really have a lot of podcast specific equipment. So you had to use like musician stuff, like things that musicians use to record, like the Zoom recorders and things like that. And fortunately, my brother at the time, he was helping me start it. He was he had a band and he had all this recording stuff, right? Audio mixers, things like that. And so I bought a couple, microphones off Amazon and gave it a shot, and it worked out well. And then I just continued to buy more equipment, better stuff. Like I think you said that you were using the Rode Procaster
Yeah.
mixing board. I have the same one right next to me. And but at the same time, it was awesome because there's so much information on YouTube, right? So I was like, well, I want to start a podcast. Bam, there's 40 YouTube videos about it. So after watching 40 of them, I figured, okay, I can do this, and I did it. And then, started a website, started the podcast, got it hosted through Apple and all the different platforms. Started the Patreon, and then started building this community that we have now within the podcast. And it's one of those things that I think it goes in line with what we've been talking about. It's just literally, I think we're at the best time in the world to ever try things new, because there's so much information to figure it out. Like, to be a custom painter now is amazing, but when I got into it, there was no YouTube to show you, right? I had to walk into this shop, and there happened to be people that did custom paint there, and I got to see it, you know? Now it's like, no matter what you want to do, whether it's starting a podcast or photography or woodworking and all these different types of things, like you can easily get the basics down by just spending an afternoon on YouTube watching a couple videos, finding out what tools you may need or what you need to do, like, and that's pretty much how I did it. I just looked it up and did it. So
Yeah, and I think nowadays sometimes you have, for example, the difficulties. It's that there is so much information that in the beginning, when you have no clue about something, it's different to sort it out which one is the correct information to go with. So, for example, after a year, I do, like on our Instagram page and on our website, we call them the hits. So we do like separate posts which are about how to make money out of creativity, how to get inspired, how to get triggered, like to do something. And we did a post about how to start your podcast with really a list of things that we would do now after a year and a half, a year, when I know what is worth to buy, how to go lean in the beginning, and maybe how to build upon, which I didn't know. So I ended up buying some stuff that now I don't need anymore, just because I didn't know. I didn't have clue how it works. But it's and I'm still improving. And now it's like little steps. Every few weeks I learn something new, and I add it to my process.
It's the same thing that we had to do with for the video part of our podcast. I mean, forever our podcast was just audio only. And sometimes when I travel and I go to different places, I only do audio podcasts still. But learning how to get the cameras, what cameras to get, what switchers to, learning the whole world of live streaming was very, very complicated, because there's so much. And even now, I don't understand a lot of it, HDMI or SDI, all these different types of terms and things that are just kind of out of my knowledge base. But same thing, I spent a lot of money in the wrong direction with trying to get our podcast video right. And now I have it down and I got it figured out and I understand it. But it was a couple grand in the wrong direction the first go around. You know what I mean? So
how did you transition to video? What kind of gear are you using, guys? Because when I was watching the latest, you also live stream now, and I saw that the quality is really good. It's do you have also a producer, because it's a multi-camera thing? So what kind of stuff, if you can unveil for me and for the audience, if there are other people?
So we use camcorders, basically the same kind of stuff that Rogan uses. The same, actually, we run the same cameras that Rogan runs. And fortunately, they're not that bad. They're don't get me wrong, they're expensive, but they're not as bad as some video camera stuff is. They're like $1,500 a piece. Some video cameras are in the $5,000 piece for the cinema cameras and stuff like that. So it's not that bad. But we run that. You have to have a very, very powerful computer to live stream, because it's using so much of the memory and the GPU on the computer that like right now we're doing this podcast on my MacBook Pro. This thing's really powerful, but it's not powerful enough to do live streaming, right? And run cameras. So I had to buy a big desktop tower computer specifically for all this, and just to run the program. But then we also have like it's from Blackmagic. It's called the ATM Mini, and basically it gives you 4 inputs or 4 cameras, and we run 2 cameras on it, and then we run a laptop so we can pull up any kind of information that people, if we're talking about something, then they can pull up the deal and the viewer can see it. It's just about making, I mean, in my opinion, I started watching Joe Rogan's podcast. I started watching it because above my table that I do all my artwork at, or all the custom paint work, I have a big screen TV or a flat screen TV. And so I would put Rogan's podcast on there and just watch the video. I'm not watching it all day long like I'm watching a TV show, but it's playing and I'm listening. And then every once in a while when they talk about something that's interesting, I'll look up and see what they're saying, what they're doing. And I feel like, I don't know if I have it in me to just sit there and watch someone talk for 3 hours, right? Like podcasts are designed to be, you do it while you're doing something else, right? You're working out, driving to work, at work. It's for that consumption, right? So finding ways to make people want to watch us talk on a podcast for 3 hours is, you're trying to find a way to make it entertaining so people want to check it out, you know, and adding the ability to bring in the clips and the websites and see what we're talking about has been very helpful. So I don't know, it's a growing process. I mean,
and the studio and the whole setup looks dope too, because it's all about, you know, you have all these pictures, helmets around, and I mean, it's everything very well integrated into this world. So like you guys yourself, part of the setup, fit completely in within the setup. But I think it's like it's crazy how podcasts, when the conversation of the podcast has a good grow, can really takes you away. Like you can feel really like just sitting there next to the people who are talking. And then when guys do podcasts for a longer time, it's like you get you feel like you know them, like because in the end of the day you're yourself on most of the, like, unless it's not some very hardly scripted podcast, which is I don't know. And you said like podcast was not designed to be viewed, but I think that podcast now, it has so many different definitions, you know. For example, in Europe, most of the mass media now are doing their own podcasts, but they're not really a podcast. They're like 10 minutes audio, and that could be like what they're doing is just taking maybe an article that could have been written and just discuss it for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So it can be.
I mean, there, you know, like you hit the nail on the head. There's so many different ways that podcasts are, you know, like whether it's conversations, whether it's one person saying, you know, like talking about something, like there's just a lot to it, you know, and you know, like I said, we did build the studio. I do have other areas that I'm interested in, and I've thought about, you know, doing other podcasts. I thought about doing one only for photography, but that's a very, very saturated market, and I'm not good enough to be, I'm not a professional in that, if you will. So I'm still learning. So I would have to take a much different approach in that world. And I don't know, like I have a lot of money invested in all this stuff in here to create this studio, and I kind of want to see it working every day in some form or fashion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether it's on a podcast or making other types of content, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the thing is that what is funny is that it's expensive to produce the first one, but once you have the gear, it's very easy to produce multiple ones, because like you don't build again cameras. You maybe, I don't know if you don't, there are these guys, for example, these Bulgarian podcasts, they try to do something like the Rogan podcast just for Bulgaria. and they have a pretty neutral studio as a background. So they rent the studio, and actually a few days ago I saw that other people were in their studio, and I was like, well, I have seen that studio. And so I've been also thinking about offering this service here in the area, because, as I said, this is still not so much discovered here in Europe. Like today I told my work to my colleague, I'm having a podcast tonight, and she was like, oh really, you have a podcast? I don't know anyone who has a podcast. And you can, I think still it's pretty, like it hasn't arrived to the masses here. Like there are not so many podcasters. I think it's going to get bigger in Europe. And I think that it's interesting. My podcast is maybe a little different than, like, the most listeners come from the US, but I'm maybe different because the podcast is mainly with people from Europe. So you got to listen something in English with some people that are from places which are really, really far away from you. Yeah. Like for me, it's really interesting to listen to American podcasts because I love the Joe Rogan podcast, the Jocko Willing podcast, all kind of different podcasts. So it's fun. And now I think I'm gonna stick to yours because it's also entertaining, and I like that you guys talk outrageous stuff. You have my same humor as I like it. And when you to go back a little bit to the shop thing, when you started the shop, how was it also to start that thing? Because I guess if podcast is expensive, maybe a paint shop it's even more, right?
Yeah. The paint shop is very expensive, but fortunately you can kind of build that over time, add more spray guns, more tools, things like that. And also buy better equipment over time. It's expensive, man. Don't get me wrong. Like there's a lot of tools that go into painting that are very expensive, just like in the podcast world, but you make a lot more money in paint. I mean, it's like, I do a paint job and, I take home a pretty paycheck for it, and it pays for itself now. But, 10 years ago when I was buying the tools, I would have to do a paint job and then use some of the money, or in some cases, all the money, to buy another gun so that the next paint job is better. You know what I mean? So it took a lot of buying things I needed and building up the shop to have all the tools and all the necessary items to get jobs done. And then eventually you start making money after that. You know what I mean? Some people that's part of the building the business part, like some people take loans out and they'll buy $60,000 worth of the equipment that you need to do these things. Fortunately, I was able to build my equipment by using other people's shops until I got enough of my own stuff to start my own, and since I do all the artwork, I've never had a hard time finding a place that would let me come in and do my job in their shop. You know what I mean? Because I don't need a lot of space. And most of them want me to do something for them. So I'm able to barter quite a bit within my trade. So.
And you said it
took some time.
You said that you have done now through internet work for other part of the country in the US and for even overseas. How does that work? Like, what kind of job were that? Like helmets or entire motorcycles being shipped and forward and back?
Well, fortunately, when you paint a bike, you only paint the they call them the tins. So it's just the paintable parts. So people don't send me the whole motorcycle, like the wheels, the motor. That's not a part of it, right? So I've done a helmet for a guy in France, another dude somewhere else in Europe, I forget where, and then I did a bike and a helmet for a guy in London, and he just sent me the tins. He shipped them. You got to pay like an import tax or something like that to get them back. Man, the internet, dude, like Instagram. When the Instagram came out, that was like the best thing for my world because I do something that's visual with the paint jobs, right? And then visual, like the Instagram is a visual platform. So, it made it really easy to put your work out there, get followers, and reach an audience, across the world. You know what I mean? I get hit up from people all over the world all the time asking how much, wanting to get figure out how to get the work to me or get a job for me, but they have a hard time with their taxes and stuff getting things shipped to and from their countries. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, well, just fly me there and I'll do the work there. So
Yeah.
trying to get a free vacation.
Yeah, an occasion to visit. Well, like funny enough, now you guys can come over, but we cannot come over in the U.S. currently because your border is still closed. But our borders are widely open for you. So, yeah, but it sounds cool. Like, I mean, I don't know if I were you here, I would do bicycles because here bicycles are big thing. Like we move a lot around with bicycles, especially in Germany, because most of the city are pretty flat. You have mountains just in the south side of Germany, and there are some like here you can see a lot of weird like sort of bicycle shaped vehicles. So if you want to say like there are this laying bicycle, there are literally people who have this. I don't know. I think they're self-made where you lay down. But I think they're really, really dangerous because the cars barely can see you. And so, there are a lot of bicycles because, you don't pay. It's expensive to go around with a car or with even with public transportation because it's so developed. It's pretty expensive. Like it's €900 a year just to move inside the city if you buy like a card. And so bicycle would be another possibility. Maybe I should take apart my bicycle, send it to you, get some cool flames on it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, there's actually a big industry here too with painting bicycles as well. I have a couple buddies that have done some really awesome bikes. So, yeah, it's always a possibility.
maybe your next transition to a new field might be. And before you mentioned like that the podcast is sponsored, do you have like sponsors within the field of motorbikes because you're very niche? Like
it's pretty much all motorcycles, and I mean, so I'm a painter by trade, but I do a lot of travel on motorcycles, and I've built a lot of motorcycles. You would think that I would have a podcast more geared towards paint because that's really what I'm a professional in. But the paint industry is very small, and it's not as they don't spend money on us, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And so it would be almost impossible to get the brands to fork over any checks for sponsorships and things like that. And motorcycles is a bigger scene, and I have the ability to get a bigger audience, which then opens up the doors for bigger possibilities with sponsorships. So I do bring painters on the podcast, but it's not a paint podcast. You know what I mean? It's a kind of motorcycle and all the things surrounding it podcast. You know what I mean? So I bring photographers on that are also in the field of shooting motorcycles, or I bring, fabricators on that make products for bikes or weld or all those different types of things. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, and if you're so long in the field, like if you're painting motorcycles for so long, at some point you'll learn, even if you don't want to learn, like how a motorbike works. It's just natural. But what kind of like do you have like I don't know, I can imagine that people that have body part shops or body part producers or even motorbicycles producer they want to advertise on your podcast?
Yeah, I mean, most of those do. So we do we carry 4-5 sponsors. Like the helmets that I do is a brand called Simpson Motorcycle Helmets, and they're my biggest sponsor. And then we have a brand that makes engine components, S&S Cycles. Thundermax is a computer company. They make the ECMs that go on the motorcycles. And then we have a company that does the lights for the bikes, like all the headlights, taillights. And then we have a company called Lexan that does the headsets that go in your helmet, so you can listen to the radio or communicate with other riders and things like that. So it's all in the field of motorcycles, but definitely kind of spread out amongst the different areas of motorcycles, if you will. So,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a cool thing to do. And in our pre-podcast conversation, you were mentioning that you're like among the top podcasts in that niche and in that field in the US. And the US, it's the
yeah,
biggest country of podcast listeners. So it's yeah, I think it's really good what you're doing there, and I've been impressed. I told you, like, when I watched the quality of the video and the streaming and the setup of the studio, it's everything is like top of the game. Like, you cannot be ashamed in front of anyone, so to say. Like, it's
yeah,
it's really good.
yeah.
And
It's Go ahead.
and how the other dudes are just like your friends, or
Yeah.
is it like your shop in general, like a one main show, or do you have also other people? Oh,
I have it's myself and then my guy that does all the producer stuff on the podcast, Saxon. He also works and does the wet sanding on the parts downstairs, and he helps me make other content for the shop as well. So, um, it's just the two of us, and then we have different guests on for the podcast. You know what I mean? Different people come in, and we have the conversations and whatnot. But it's just us two that are really here in the shop.
what kind of among the all the assignments that you have gotten so far, is there some things that you have done, like paint jobs or motor bicycles, that you think you thought, okay, this is a really cool assignment and I really love this idea? Or how do the clients come with ideas what they want, or do they ask you to do a
Yeah.
concept? How does it work?
Usually nowadays people see work that I've already done and they like it, and they're inspired to do something for themselves as well on that. So usually people come to me with, like, I like this style that you did, but I wanted these colors. And so I have to do that style of paint, not the same job, but something in that wheelhouse that that to kind of appease the customer. I get jobs quite a bit that are very inspiring, very I'm excited for. I'm really excited to do them. I couldn't tell you what makes me excited about doing a job. I can tell you it's not the work itself. Like, I don't want to get excited to go to work, but um, who it's for, what it's for, that tends to be the thing that kind of motivates me the most. Is if someone's building a bike and it's, say, for Sturgis, our big event here in the United States, then to me that's a great opportunity to have my work on one of the biggest stages, you know, motorcycle wise. So I'm more inspired by those kind of opportunities than anything. Um, but the rest of it, man, like, I guess the sad truth about doing any of this stuff is that, you know, with the paint work, it's my job. So it's just like any other job anybody else has. It gets, sometimes it's amazing. Sometimes it's like, it's the most boring thing I've ever done. You know what I mean? It's, it's a weird one, you know?
But do people come with like ideas like, I don't know, I want it with flames and tribals and this color blue with combination of this yellow or something like that? Or do
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
come, I don't know, are there people that see your work and come, I don't know, with a specific bicycle and tell you, what would you do? Could you do a concept and make it for me?
Yeah. So we get people that the people that they're not really giving me any artistic freedom, I usually shy away from those jobs because I'd like to be able to create something for you based on what you gave, like the information you gave me. I like these colors. I like this look. Um, those are the what I like to do. I like to, and then, you know, when it comes to the helmets, I like doing helmets the most because that's it's a lot more meaningful for the owners to get a helmet than a bike. A bike paint job is looked at more like a material possession, like it's just another thing they got to add to the bike to make it cool. When they do helmets, they're much more personalized, almost like someone getting a tattoo. It means something to them. You know what I mean? Most of the people that we do helmets for, they're not ever getting, you don't really sell helmets like used helmets. I don't want to put my head in a helmet you've been wearing for 2 years. You know what I mean? It's kind of gross, right? So helmets are kind of for them, and they buy them in a different way. And I get to get a little bit more personal with people and find out things that really mean something to them, and then try to turn that into custom paint. You know what I mean? That's probably the most rewarding part in the area that I'm in. You know?
Yeah, I like, and I think that a lot of the there is a lot of emotional connection. I think yourself, you have done for yourself a helmet, which there is the portrait of your grandfather, from what I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
Is it like a lot of people that really do it also connected with some emotional emotion?
Yeah, for some people it is. For some people, I think that they get the helmet that is like a family member that's passed, or an animal, a dog. I've done a lot of dog portraits, but there's also, like, I have a few helmets that are just like funny. It's got a funny character on it from a funny TV show or movie, and so we get a lot of those too. And then it's kind of a wide variety of things that we put on helmets. Like, I have my first helmet I ever did for myself has Samuel Jackson on there from Pulp Fiction, and he just got these crazy eyes, and it just kind of I don't know, that one really put me, that helmet did a lot for me in my career, because it helped me get into the helmet painting market, and there's good money in painting helmets. You know what I mean? So way better than painting bikes, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I have some kind of relationship with helmets because, as I told you, I grew up in Italy, and in Italy, when I was growing up, we grew up with the MotoGP, if you're aware, with that, like, racing league. And when I was a teenager, the best guy there, the most entertaining guy there was Valentino Rossi. So for some special races, he would have some funny helmets too. Like, I don't know, I remember when he was racing in the home race in Italy at Mugello, which is the track. He had on the top of the helmet his face screaming. So it was really funny, because when you would watch the race, it looked like there was a guy without a helmet on the race. So I
actually I remember that. Yeah, I used to watch MotoGP quite a bit too, and Rossi was always fun to watch.
Yeah, and I saw one of your podcasts where you had a guest over that was telling how they did like cancel culture helmets with Pepe the Frog and something else.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I think it's like you can do. I see here you have done a helmet with the alien on, which maybe you should do a helmet for Joe Rogan with some aliens or stuff like that.
I thought about doing one of those, or Joe Rogan helmet for myself, but
yeah,
I don't know.
That would be dope, man.
Yeah.
Like a black one, man. A black one with the logo.
Yeah, the thing, like I said, the helmets, they're great. They're a great like opportunity to be very, very artistically free, and you don't have to, like, say on a bike. A bike usually has at least 5 pieces that has to be painted, like a gas tank, a front fender, a rear fender, and little covers here and there. Well, let's say you do a gas tank and you make it really badass. Well, you got 4 more pieces you have to do that same thing on again to make it all match and work together. On a helmet, you just have the one helmet. So I don't really hold back anything on helmets, because I don't have to match it on another piece. You know what I mean? So it becomes a lot more like freeing, if you will, artistically, to do a helmet, because you're only doing one piece. So
And you mentioned that you have now also some in the process of doing this artwork. You use computer which prints for you like vinyl stickers. How does that work? Do you have like a specific software where you draw the stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, I use a program called FlexiSign, and basically you're working in what they call vectors, right? And vector files are basically, like you know a JPEG is like a picture.
Yeah.
You know when you blow it up and make it bigger, it gets pixelated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know
Well,
what it means. Vectors. It's like if you scale it up,
Okay.
it's just a result of curves. So it's like basically a CAD drawing, similar.
Exactly. So I picked up that very easily early on, like in 2006, when I first got into custom paint, because I had a lot of experience with AutoCAD, and it was very similar, in my opinion, the programs, like dealing with the lines and drawing and things like that. So for me, that part came easy, and I understand the program very well. So you're able to do more complicated designs that doing with tape would either take an astronomical amount of time, or it's not really that possible with tape to get it that small or do it that intricate. So the vinyl cutter just opens up the door for that type of stuff. Or when you're painting logos and stuff on things, you can print out the logo, make the templates and the stencils, and go to town basically.
Yeah, because I see you have a lot of helmets where there are like some sort of text on them, like I don't know, different things. And how do you do all the portraits? How do you paint that? That's crazy artwork. That's with the gun, then with the air pistol.
Yeah, with the airbrush is how we do those. And what you're basically doing is the process in which I do those is just like the process when people do tattoos,
Yeah.
like when they put the stencil down and then they kind of shade into the different areas. It's really the same process, like, to do that. I'm trying to figure out how to really explain it the best way. It's like, you ever heard the term painting by numbers?
No, not yet.
So if you take a color image or image period, like say a black and white image, there's a scale of grays, right?
Yeah.
And if you were to like draw a small shape around each different, if you were to like say, okay, there's 4 values of gray, I'm going to draw a line around each value from the lightest to the darkest, right? And then you just cut out each one of those. That's kind of painting by numbers. You're basically filling in this area with this color, this area with this color, and then next thing you know, you have like a template for the face, and it looks kind of like I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe it. It looks kind of like a cartoon, and then you come back with the airbrush again, and you do the details that blend those things together, and then you have the portraits. They look more realistic, if you will, and I mean it's not a I probably did a bad job explaining that, but
no, I think I got it. Like
once you see it,
you just do it firstly a little bit more raw, and then you go into details, adding further scales of that colors in between, so that you get the final image.
Yep.
And I'm curious. I'm sorry if I'm asking you these questions, but every time we call the Creative Insider, so I don't want to be like one of those places where we just ask about the creative sides without asking the practical sides, because for me it's like important to understand for people who are creative that when you do something like design, you have to do it for a living and not underestimate yourself. How much could it cost to have a helmet done? Even like, let's say also for people who would need to ship it over, but I think they just need to pay the shipment, or a motorbike. How do you calculate the price? Is there also any difference of the quality of paint? Like, do you use steady kind of paint, or there are different kinds of paint? What are the price ranges for such a job?
Well, the way with helmets I have finite prices for helmets. So, our helmet paint jobs are $1,500 to the $2,000. If you want an airbrush picture on top, it's $2,000. If you don't want it, it's $1,500. and then they have to buy the helmet from me, so I make money selling the helmet. When it comes to motorcycles, I base the price on the time it takes to do it, right? So there are cheaper paints, but when you get to a certain point, I feel like it's very important to only offer the best that you can do. If say somebody comes to me and they want a Fast Life Garage paint job, but they don't quite have enough money, so I offer to do it for them at a cheaper price by using cheaper quality materials, then later on, let's say those materials fail or they don't last, or they start, there's a reason why they're cheaper. They're not as good of materials as what we use, right? Well, that customer is not going to go, well, I did pay for the cheaper materials. All his friends are going to go, man, Fast Life Garage did a horrible job on that guy's bike. Like to the public eye, like they don't know the fine details. All they know is that I painted it and he got it from me. So if it's crap, then it's going to fall back on me, right? So I don't offer anything but the best that I can do at the price that I need to get it done for. But basically, it's two things. It's the size of the project, meaning how many parts we're painting, and it's how detailed this paint job is going to be, which will determine how long it's going to take me to do it, therefore resulting in, okay, it's this price, that price, this price, right? So we don't do a lot of bikes. We don't paint a whole lot of them because it's very expensive. Materials cost a lot of money. It's very time consuming to do, like my personal bike has 15 pieces on it, when you take it all apart to paint. So it takes a long time to do that, sometimes a month to do something that many pieces. Yeah, it's tough,
Yeah, for yourself, it's also taking it apart. Actually, it will cost some time. And what kind of motorbike you have?
I have a Harley Davidson Road Glide. It's a touring model, so I get to travel the country with it. It's my favorite bike. And then I have a FXR, which is a smaller bike that doesn't have like a fairing to block the wind or saddlebags to put stuff in. So I actually just
yeah. Go ahead.
I was just say I posted recently both of my bikes on my Instagram. But yeah, they're fun.
Yeah, I guess the red one is the small one, right?
Yeah, the red one's the small one, and then the goldish brown one is my big bike.
Yeah, they both look dope, man. But as a European guy, I like the smaller one better.
Yeah. Trust me, I like it too, man. It's fun it's easy to jump on and go run around on,
Yeah, and I think that you guys have this. I see also your big bike. You guys have these huge distances, and I guess pretty straight roads. So it makes sense to build such a bike here. And in Europe, generally, people like more this sport bike style, like MotoGP. So that you can go on the mountains and have lots of fun by doing the
twisties,
yeah. So that's the whole deal here. But I always been attracted to American culture. I've said that many times on the podcast that when I was a kid, I was used to, like, we were living in Bulgaria, which was a post-communist country, and my dad left when I was 6 for Italy, and there were like 2 years where I was just with my mom in Bulgaria, and there was no internet in the 90s. We didn't have it at home, and like I didn't know how the Western world looked like. The only thing that I had connection to that culture were the American movies. And everything in American movies looked way, way cooler than what were my surroundings back then. Because now Bulgaria is way more developed than what it was in the 90s. And so I always loved like American cars, American Harley Davidson bikes. And currently, I'm really much into the pickup trucks. I really love those
Yeah.
big ass pickup trucks that you have over there, guys. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, here wouldn't make sense because you don't have to. You cannot park it. Like we don't have the room for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like when you go to places like New York or San Francisco, even LA in some areas, it's very impractical to have a car or a truck, period, because of the space, parking. It gets complicated in our bigger cities, but we do have a lot of space. So, like, downtown Dallas, the main city that I live close to, it's tough to have a bike there. Um, but out here, I'm like 30 miles, which I guess you'd have to do
It's
the thing again,
around
kilometers.
40 kilometers, which for Europe, it's a long distance. For America, it's like around the corner.
Yeah, exactly. So, I live outside of the city, so we have a little bit more space out here to have things.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think it's funny, like when it comes to the pure sheer distances that here, like this would be a consistent distance, like a pretty long drive for us because the countries are way smaller. I think Texas alone, it's like twice as big as Germany or something like that. In Germany, it's one
yeah,
of the biggest countries here. Um,
yeah.
yeah, man. So like, I think we have covered most of the topics. I don't know if you have something on your plate that you want to still share, or because
Uh, I think we've talked about quite a bit. It's always weird. Like, first off, it's very different being on this side of the microphone here. Being interviewed versus doing it. But um, I don't know, man. Like, I think it's cool, like what your podcast is, and talking to different types of creative people and getting a chance to dive into all these different worlds. I think that's pretty awesome. I envy that about your podcast and you in general, because I'd love to be able to sit there and do the same thing and just listen to a guy that builds something. Tell me about his life. I think that's awesome. But I guess we have your podcast. We can just listen to that.
no, you can start your own one. I'm not a guy that tries to keep the market for myself. Like I think the more people are out there that start doing podcasts, it's nicer, and I think that you can make a cool story out of everyone. Like
Yeah.
90% of the people that I try to interview, they say I don't have anything to say, and then we sit down, and it feels like a few minutes, but then we're like 2 hours in, and it's interesting and creates a lot of connections. But as you mentioned before, like I like to build up this sort of toolbox of inspiration or of pumping up ideas for creatives. You said that one source of inspiration for you was in the beginning of your career, the movie Fast and Furious. Is there something else that you enjoy, like as an inspiration, like books, maybe maybe a place or a motorbike or something that you do, an activity or book, something that you think it's something that have given you something extra or changed you a little bit?
Yeah, I think places. Fortunately, traveling most of America on a motorcycle, it gives you a much different perspective of the country. Um, when you're on a bike, like you're forced to pay attention to everything, your surroundings, your what's in front of you, what's behind you. When you drive a car, like you tend to get lost in your phone or in a conversation with somebody in the car. But on a bike, you're stuck in the world. And I find myself, like I was in New York actually whenever you reached out to me about doing this podcast a couple weeks ago. And as much as I love being in the mountains in Colorado or Wyoming, when you're in New York and you're standing on Long Island, you're looking back at the city on Manhattan. It's like looking at a mountain range. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's inspiring. When you go to places like that, like you said, you watched a lot of movies in the 90s, and I did too, man. The first time I ever went to LA, like I was like, oh my God, like this is where that movie was done. And, there's energy in those places, right? And when you're there, you feel like you tap into it. And that's one thing I love about traveling, man. And then seeing the countryside from a motorcycle is an experience I think a lot of people should try to have. I think my favorite, biggest inspirational movie ever was Forrest Gump. That movie I think is many jokes has been made about it because there's lots of stuff to make jokes about. When he jumps and he starts running across the country, man, like that's an amazing part. And I've actually ridden my bike to a lot of the places that they filmed those spots on in that movie. I think that shit's cool as hell.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. Like, I can only tell you to try to make some time and come over in Europe. Especially, you can start from Germany, Frankfurt. It's called the Manhattan because it's like a small size New York, and from here you can start going down to Switzerland, Italy, which are wonderful places. Also for maybe renting a motorbike would be the perfect experience for you. But before we go, where can people find you online? Like your artwork, your podcasts, what are the main channels?
On Instagram, you can follow all the stuff we do at the Fast Life Garage. If you want to see my photography, it's under the Fast Life Visuals. Our website, fastlifegarage.com, has a link to YouTube, Patreon. It has all of our podcasts on there. I mean, that's pretty much it. We try to stay off Facebook as much as we can, but Instagram's the go-to.
I'll put all the links in the description of the podcast so that people can just click and check it out right away. And thank you one more time for making some time for me and to sharing your story, and have a good rest of your day, man.
You too, man. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The whole world stops just like that.
Hey friends, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. You've been amazing. Before we go, I just want to remind you that if you want to support us, you can just go on the creativeinsider.com, where you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, or you can follow us on our social media channels, which are Instagram at TCI Podcast, or the LinkedIn page, The Creative Insider. By doing this, you will have a bigger social media presence, which always looks attractive to more and more important guests. And so this is very fundamental. And if you really love what we do and you want to help us doing a better production, just click on the Patreon link below, where you can support us with the wished amount of money you think it's okay for you. It's a monthly subscription, but you can cancel anytime. So thank you very much and have a good week, guys. Bye-bye.
The whole world stops just like that.